What up, Long Beach? It's another year and another episode of Long Beach Sports Talk right here at Gazette Newspapers and the Press Telegram. It feels so good to be back. As always, I'm co-sports editor JJ Fiddler to my left.
Co-sports editor Mike Gardabasio, and to my left,
Tyler Hendrickson. Have you ever read Gazette Sports on a blimp? We want to thank our sponsors, Naples Rib Company, and I am fiending for some ribs today. Barbecue sauce is already on my lips right now, and Papalucci's, both down on 2nd Street. They put the E in 2nd Street, and they put the us in Gazette Sports.
Oh yeah, we are going to get some Naples and some Papalucci's this week, to be sure, like we always do.
Got to get some Naples right after we record, actually.
Support the sponsors.
We got to get through this thing.
It's been a busy week for us. It's been a busy summer for us, really. So we are sitting outside trying to soak up the summer before we really get into the fall. You know what that means. High school football coming at you. You can read the previews for the big teams here in the local area right now at GazetteSports.com and the Press Telegram website. We've got video highlights, we've got pictures, we've got quotes from the players and the coaches. Everything pretty much you want to know before we kick this thing off on Friday. But we're kind of previewing a season that already started because Long Beach Poly Jackrabbits hit the road last Friday to go to Arizona to take on Centennial. No, not Corona Centennial or Compton Centennial. It's the Coyotes from Arizona, state champs, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, you thought Corona Centennial was a drive. No, the Peoria Centennial, defending Division II state champions, moved up to Division I in Arizona. They wanted the test of playing a major California power. Poly wanted the test of playing in 104-degree heat and making that long 6-hour drive. And Poly came out with the win 13-12. Very close game. Looked like a first game. Very sluggish on offense, both teams, but we got through it.
Yeah, against the honey bunches of Coyotes, and it was really an ugly game. I mean, it was nice to be able to watch it on the live stream from back here in California and see the game, but not a lot of highlights. You did catch one, though, Mike, from Jack Jones, the ever-electric senior, and he really looks like he's going to have to bear a lot of the brunt of the offense if they continue to struggle the way they did, especially in the first half.
Yeah, well, I think what you're going to see, I would be surprised if you don't see Poly going, I mean, they just don't have the passing offense they did last year. They had one of their best passing seasons in the history of the program. But for right now, I think it was very clear in the second half of that game that they do need to run the ball more. I mean, let Jack make plays, absolutely, and he made some great plays on defense too. But at the end of the day, the strength of that Centennial team, they have 2 Division I linemen, so that's their strength, was their offensive and defensive line, and that's where Poly won the game. So I think if you're Coach Antonio Pierce, if you're a Poly fan, you've got to look at that and go, okay, so this is probably where our bread is buttered. We were all sort of laughing about it because that's always a story at Poly, is how far do they go away from the run? How long does it take them to remember, okay, once we start running the ball, this thing's going to roll for us again? And I will say that sophomore running back Michael Mawai only touched the ball, I think, 5 times. He looks like he might really be something special for the next 3 years, though.
We could be talking about this a lot, the difference between how much these local offenses, well, heck, how much offense in the game of football, high school, college, NFL, is going towards the spread, the no huddle, putting a lot on the arm of your quarterback. But we also look at the local high school football scene. You find the best running teams, and you're going to find the league champs almost every time.
Well, that's just where it's easiest to get your money. You know what I mean? On the ground, and you win it in the weight room, and they always talk about you just have to run the football. You have to run the football. And there's just fewer variables when you can just hand it to a guy and let him get 8-10 yards a carry. And that last touchdown drive where Poly was just putting it on the ground and gashing Centennial, it was the first time they moved the ball comfortably, and it was simple. It was just draw plays back up the middle, and it was just gashing. And you could see from the start of that drive, it was just a matter of time before they got into the end zone.
I want to pull a Men in Blazers and start #fullback. And just do #fullback every time we see a fullback lining up on the field. Because it won't be that often, but let's celebrate them when they're out there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's something Poly tried. They put middle linebacker Josh Brown at fullback on a 4th and short, and it didn't work out, which obviously he heard plenty about from his teammates.
And his brothers, no doubt.
But yeah, I mean, you guys said it. If you look at the 2 best teams we've got in our area, Poly and Bosco, those are also probably the 2 best offensive lines and the 2 best running offenses that we've got in our area.
Yeah, speaking of Bosco, Bosco's got a huge game this week, probably game of the week here. Full opening night schedule that we will get to. On the top of it, Bosco at La Mirada. La Mirada trying to prove that they can hang with the big boys in Bosco, and Bosco may be trying to extend their reach, per se.
Well, speaking of long bus rides, yeah, they're going out to La Mirada to see what they can do. And honestly, that line for Bosco, it looks like a college line. And so I'm really excited to take a look at that, especially because they have a college running back, or soon to be, in Sean McGrew, one of the fastest kids in the area, going to Washington. And he was eaten last year, and now you feel like they're going to give him a few more touches and let him really take over the game with Josh Rosen gone. But Jason Negro is very confident in that offense, and we'll see what they can do against a very talented La Mirada defense. But Quentin Davis, he's supposed to step in and be the guy and fill the shoes right away. So we'll see how that offense hits the ground running without Josh Rosen, because he's been the guy the last 3 years.
I know it's strange to sound now, kind of retrospect being 2020, but I think losing the championship game to Centennial was the best thing to happen to the 2015-2016 Bosco Braves. Not taking into account how good that 2014 team was, but now this team seems to have that little chip on their shoulder like, well, that was ours. It should have been ours. We started a couple games a little faster. It would have been ours. Now let's go get it back.
I was out at Bosco practice a couple weeks ago, and it's interesting you bring that up because Jason Negro almost seems to directly reference that at the end of the practice. He was telling his team, I didn't think your pace was good enough. I didn't think your focus was good enough. We want to have a championship level pace and focus. Now, we've heard a lot of coaches use that, that kind of talk. Okay, we want to be a championship type team, but you could tell that the players, this is a guy who coached a national championship team 2 years ago and a team who wasn't quite good enough last year. So if you're one of his players, you're hearing Jason Negro say that and you're going, okay, well, this guy obviously knows the difference between those levels of focus, so I better listen to him.
I'm almost more interested in the halftime score than I am in the final score to see if Bosco's been able to figure out in the offseason how to start games a little bit faster. I can't think of a game last year in the Trinity League and in the playoffs that they started quickly.
Right, I think that's going to be a key for them, especially with the new, a lot of new players, with specifically the new quarterback. I mean, wide receivers are very experienced with Anselm Ume and Jared Harrell on the outside, and then, of course, McGrew in the line. But I think that's a good point, JJ, because I think everyone kind of expects Bosco to win just because, Pac-5 powerhouse, higher division team, all that stuff. So you want to see how quickly out of the gates they can get and if they can assert their dominance quickly. La Mirada on the other end, how long can they hang and, sort of run the ball, control it, limit mistakes, and not be intimidated by the, superior opponent, as it were.
Let's swing it around back to the Moore League, where obviously it is the Poly show and everybody else is a supporting character. But that Chase Pack is a little bit closer this year. I think we can all agree that Jimmy Nolan and Lakewood are probably the cut above the rest of the Chase Pack. But they're not deep. They don't got a lot of bodies out there, and really, honestly, not many of the Moore League teams have a lot of bodies out there. So it could end up being, at the end of the season, he who is healthiest is second place in the Moore League.
Yeah, that's a great point, and you're absolutely right. I talked to a lot of coaches in the league, and everyone said that new LBUSD rule really hit them, that their freshman classes were really down because no one wants to put their kid into school with a walk-on coach where the coach might not be there. And as a result, then you'd have to, if you're trying to transfer your kid to another school in the district, you're going to have to sit him for a year. So I think that definitely is kind of going to bring the rest of the league down a bit. But it does seem to have brought everyone down together. No one really seems to be a lot further ahead of anyone else, like you said. It is interesting. Health will be a big thing. I think line play will also be really big because there's not a lot of heft around the league, at least from what I saw.
No, not at all. Same situation we had last year, too.
Well, it sort of does feel like there's just this constant swirl underneath Poly, and Poly had their coaching change, but then there's kind of the swirl of new coaches happening all the time, where the longest tenured coach in the league is John Kane in his third year, which is crazy, over at Jordan, and they have an opportunity to get into the playoff conversation. Cabrillo was the third-place team last year. They have a new head coach. Milliken was right on the cusp and seemed to be improving. They played for a playoff spot in the last week, but then they also have a new head coach. So there's a lot of that turnover, and then Wilson and Compton also with new coaches they know, but new in returning to being the head coach. So just constant question marks in the Moore League. Everyone's just looking for that consistency, but I think, JJ, you bring up a good point with numbers down and, sort of limited playmakers across the board. You need to stay healthy and have your guys, stay your guys throughout the entire season, because you never know when someone could come up and get you, because I think there's going to be a lot of competitive games.
Yeah, time is a flat circle. We've seen all of this before. And if you go to my column that we wrote for the previews at the Gazettes and the Press-Telegram, we talked to CIF Southern Section Commissioner Rob Wygod, a Long Beach guy, about that problem. And he had some pretty interesting things to say, mainly putting the onus on schools, communities, and support groups to make these jobs more attractive so that we don't have some of these high school football players playing under 3 different head coaches in 4 years at their high school. Most of them get their season underway Friday night under the lights, 7 p.m. We mentioned Lakewood. They are hosting Sarah from Gardena, obviously a very quality program for the Cavaliers, starting a murderer's row of a non-league schedule there for the Lancers. We've got Milliken at Linwood and Wilson at Paramount. Those are double-up games. We love that. Another tough game for Cabrillo to start the season. They are at J. Sarah. Jordan is at Capistrano Valley. So not an easy run for the Moore League in week 1.
It certainly is not, and I think we've got some coaches who have some schedules that they didn't get to put together. You mentioned Cabrillo at J. Sarah. That's a holdover from a 2-year contract last year that head coach Jason Brown had signed. And if I'm Louise Hayes, I probably don't love playing that game. I know I talked to some coaches, and this happens every time you change coaches. You've got contracts you have to fulfill, but I wonder with this new crop of coaches, if they stick around for a few years, how we might see those schedules change, I guess, in the next couple seasons.
Looking at Milliken's schedule, everything's hyper-local, and Jordan as well. Those are 2 schools that are playing games that are very close. I think the furthest either of those teams travels is like Linwood or Paramount. So they're keeping it hyper-local, and as John Kane told me, these are the games we should be playing. These are the teams that we should be playing against. So we like it because it's a lot of double-ups and it's easier to travel and cover games. I'm sure the fans like it as well. So like you said, Mike, we'll see if coaches that are able to stay for a while, if they're going to play those local games and have that competition a little more reasonable.
It's not just the Moore League that's got tough games either. We've got another Trinity League coming to town as Dominguez is going to host Orange Lutheran, which is, again, obviously a tough task. Anytime a Trinity League team is coming into the area, they're pretty good from what we understand.
Hydra Gauchos, Downey is hosting San Pedro, Warren is at Burroughs, and Bishop Montgomery is at Bellflower. The Buccaneers trying to get off to a good start in a Battle of the Bees.
Mayfair is going to visit Grand Terrace to show off that new no-huddle offense, while Norwalk is going to host Bell at Excelsior Adult School. Rancho Dominguez Prep is at New Designs Watts. Yes, you heard that correctly. New Designs Watts beginning their high school football season and program against RDP. And Valley Christian is at Laguna Beach. For all of the scores from those games on Thursday and games on Saturday, you can follow the scoreboard at presstelegram.com/highschoolsports. Let's jump in the DeLorean, hit 88, use all 1.21 gigawatts, and get to November. We are in the second week of November for high school football. Right before the playoffs start, I want to know, who do you think we're going to be talking about that is going to have other people going, wait, what?
My daughter? My newly born daughter?
Oh my!
Is that the obvious answer? You mean a football player, I assume, not a progeny of mine.
We're going to be talking about somebody we're not expecting. We're expecting Maya.
Yeah, that's fair. We know he's on the way, but I think Malik Henry at Poly is the guy who is not currently in a uniform that will probably be dominating the headlines come that time of year. The top-ranked quarterback in the 2016 class, committed to Florida State, has been admitted to Poly. And has been over there, has been seen at practice, so I think we're expecting him to be, by that time of the year, eligible, ready to go. And obviously, it just doesn't, it's like when Peyton Manning moved to the Broncos, like the top guy doesn't move a lot at any level, and so it obviously creates a lot of interest and intrigue when that happens. I think if you saw Poly's offense struggle against Peoria Centennial, as we talked about, you're obviously looking at that and going, gosh, I wonder what that would look like. Not that you're putting everything on Nolan McDonald's shoulders for Poly's struggles, because that certainly wasn't it. Receivers didn't know their routes, etc. But you do wonder, I mean, obviously you put a Division I guy at any position, and you're expecting it to create something different. So that, to me, I mean, there's already a ton of people talking about it. So I think it's safe to say 2 months from now, 3 months from now, we'll probably still be talking about it.
Yeah, great job by you, Mike, breaking that story, getting it out there at GazetteSports.com and the Press-Telegram. I got some responses from other schools who obviously felt like a kid going to a fourth school in a fourth year and coming to the local area, namely the Moore League schools, looking at Poly going, really?
You don't
Is
say.
this Is this
You
fair?
got some responses.
Yeah.
Here's a question I've got for you before we talk about that. Do you think if he had transferred to Jordan, that the response would have been different?
No.
Like, to what extent do you think
Just like if
people
he
are like,
transferred-
oh, Pauly gets another guy?
Yeah, well, just like if he transferred to a private school, I think people would be looking at it different. You know, he's going to a public school, so that kind of puts people, their ears up. Like, well, you're not supposed to be allowed to do that. When in the rules, he really is. Nothing illegal is going on. I think people automatically assume that, like, well, they probably fudged the numbers or his address or something like that, when that's not the case. But then at the end of the day, when a team plays Pauly late October, early November, and he's on the field, they're going to feel a certain way about it. Make me feel some kind of way.
It always makes me sad to an extent when a Lakewood gets a Victor Bates or a Pauly gets a Malik. When a Division I kid lands at a public school and the other public schools complain about it, it always kind of makes me sad, because to the way I see it, at least, it's sort of like, but you guys are all in the same boat. Right? And it's the private schools that we hear you guys complain about all the time. I think a lot of those complaints are very fair and well-founded. And so when I see it, it's sort of like, well, you can say, okay, this is the rich getting richer or something, but at the same time, like, would you be happier if this guy had gone to Mater Dei? Would you be happy? You know what I mean? That's sort of the way I guess I approach it, is if this is the way high school sports is, don't we want public high schools to still be able to compete?
Well, and especially at Pauly, where there's sort of unique opportunities, academically and things like that, to make sure that things will be taken care of and then he gets on to the next level. Obviously, Malik is a Florida State commit and one of the top players in the country, 5-star recruit at quarterback who was at Westlake last year and actually played Pauly, and we have a highlight video of that game so you can see him in action. But yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, it's... At what point do these kids have to go somewhere? So do you want them to go to a private school? Do you want them to go to a public school close? And obviously Pauly's perceived as the quote-unquote rich school for getting the talent in, but it's based off winning and tradition and all that.
And answering the phone, not calling people, is what Pauly would say. And that's really what any public school, or private school for that matter, would say about getting a top recruit like this.
Well, and then getting kids out to the next level. That's also good. You're going to get good coaching. You've got NFL veterans there that are coaching. So you understand why that's an attractive place to go. It's not because they're going to give you an iPad, but it's going to be several other things that brings these kids in.
If you want to do musical theater, then you want to go to Millikan because Millikan has a great musical theater program. If you want to play water polo, you want to go to Wilson because they have a great water polo program. I don't understand why those two things should be viewed so differently. That it's like, well, obviously for this academic opportunity, you go to the best school, but for this one, well, no, you should go to wherever you live next to. That kind of bothers me. And every school in the Moore League has a sports program that they're really good at. I mean, that's boys soccer players want to go to Millikan, water polo players, like I said, want to go to Wilson. So it's always just kind of confused me, I guess, but that's also because I've grown up in Long Beach, and it's just always been that way. You know what I mean? So I guess that's why it's also sort of confusing to me, because it's just like, this is not new or different particularly, and at least as far as I see it.
Let us know what you think on this issue and any issue surrounding high school sports. These transfers always bring up different issues. You can leave a comment on any story at GazetteSports.com and the Press Telegram. My surprise in November might not really be a surprise, but I think the numbers are going to be eye-popping. I think Jack Talenko and namely Jacob Gasser at Los Alamitos, the Griffins, are going to be good this year. And I think those numbers are going to be ridiculous at the end of the regular season. I honestly think the Griffins have a chance of running the table in the regular season.
So you're going with Linko and Gass. And I got to be honest with you, the Griffins, you talked about Bosco bouncing back from losing the championship game. What's Los Al's offseason been like coming off that really shocking and disappointing loss in the playoffs? I mean, we thought they were going to run roughshod and maybe make it to a title game. So you talk about motivation in the offseason, and if John Barnes can't use that for motivation, ain't no one can use that for motivation. So I think that's a great pick to look out for the Griffins. I think RDP, Rancho Dominguez Prep, the unknown quantity in Long Beach sports circles on their way up. They're very new, obviously, but they're looking to make it to the semifinals in the LA City section, Division II. They are a Long Beach school, but they're in the LA City section. They have not been over 500 in their short history, but they got a chance to do it this year. They're pretty confident with the group they've got. Wayne Crawford was very cheeky about how well he thought his team might do this year. They got to stay healthy, though. very thin. You see those smaller schools, they got to stay healthy. And I will give a shout out. I think Anthony Carswell is going to be the Moore League's leading rusher this year over at Milliken. They got a good shot to make the playoffs, and it could be 2 years in a row that there's a really exciting running back over at Milliken. Could be a D1 kid. He's going to be playing both sides of the ball, so that's going to be a challenge. But after having Donald Gordon last year, Anthony Carswell going to be fun to watch in that new Milliken offense.
All right, let me do my best Lee Hacksaw Hamilton for this one. Participation trophies, for them, against them, sound off, San Diego.
I think I would say I'm against them, but not quite so histrionically as many other people seem. I don't think that it's the end of civilization if we give a 5-year-old kid who doesn't care about sports a ribbon or a trophy or something.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to affect that kid 5 years old. If you're going to give a 16-year-old in high school participation trophy, that's different than ripping a ribbon from a 6-year-old who played AYSO soccer.
Again!
Come on, Tyler.
Why do you need to give people trophies for showing up? Just because they paid and went to practice.
So you don't believe in any ribbon but the blue ribbon?
No, like you can get... You don't have... It's not like, oh, if you ain't first, you're last. Like, you could be second place or third place. Like, that's fine. You could be on the podium. But you should want to win something. That should be... A trophy should be what it is. A reward for doing something well, not just paying the money and going to practice and then being there at games or something.
You don't want that piece of memorabilia to be able to say, hey, that's when I played for the Orioles in Little League Baseball.
The
when I was...
memorabilia is being there. You have the team photo. You have your individual photo, which I always look very swanky in. You have the memories from practice. But, like, my trophies are like in a box somewhere. I don't know, but we usually like won because I was dope or whatever. But like, you don't need to like remember that you were one of 8 teams and you were probably the 7th team or whatever.
So the 5K that I ran at the beginning of August, as it turned out, there's only 3 people in my age group. So even though I ran like 10 minutes slower than the first place finisher, I had the second place finish. To me, I didn't earn anything more. As Steven, who walked, got 3rd place because there's only 3 of us. So to me, it's like all that first, second, third stuff is sort of like a matter. It's so we treat it objectively. It's not really objective. It's entirely dependent on who's entering things and how many teams there are, what the quality of play is, or whatever. I don't know.
Why is this conversation not taking into account the way a parent or a coach speaks to a child? You're not giving them a participation trophy, telling them that they won something. You're not lying. It's here. Right. Congratulations on successfully accomplishing this. Being part of a team, learning lessons, and the such. Congratulations, you participated. You didn't say, congratulations, you won, and then hand them a participation trophy.
But there's no real required threshold, though. You know what I mean? Like, if you get an attendance award, I've heard, it's because, like, what do I know? It's you have to go every day, so there's a certain thing that you accomplish. There's a goal set out for you. You have to be better than the other teams to get a certain ranking, to get on the podium or whatever, be one of the top 3 teams. Just paying to be on the roster and then just everyone gets one just because they were there doesn't really make sense to me. Like, I just don't understand. It's validating something that doesn't need validation.
We're giving Tyler's participation trophy to somebody else.
2 quick notes. Number 1, all we're doing is changing what trophies mean. They aren't letting everyone on the top of the podium. They're not saying everyone wins a championship or whatever.
That's true.
And then my second point is what really bothered me, that I am histrionic about and that I do think is ruining society, is there was a big football camp over the year where the players it was a flyaway camp, and the players who showed up on time got prizes. That's messed up, right? Because you're an athlete, you're in high school, you're committed to the sport, you're at this camp, and you're getting a treat for not being late. That, to me, that bothers me a lot more than the participation.
Oh, absolutely. If I learned one thing from high school football, it was if you're not 5 minutes early, you're late. Right, Tyler?
Yeah. You would think that I'd be better at running, bro. You would think that I would be a better runner having been late all the time. I would have just told my coach or teacher or whatever, I'm super early for tomorrow.
That's it. That's all. There ain't no more. Another episode of Long Beach Sports Talk is in the books, but Long Beach Sports will be coming at you all athletic season long from us here at the brand new GazetteSports.com website and, of course, the Press Telegram. For Mike, for Tyler, for everybody else involved in bringing you those websites and the daily newspapers and the weekly newspapers, we thank you. To everybody else, we will see you in the stands. I am JJ Fiddler. This has been an episode of Long Beach Sports Talk. High school football is here, y'all. We'll see you in the stands.